Every year at Easter, billions of people around the world, they remember the story of a man who died and rose again 3 days later. That's right, Jesus Christ. But what if that story wasn't original? What if there's a resuscitation story that happened 2,000 years before the birth of Christ? Welcome to Spellcrafter, a series where I dive into ancient mysteries, magic, and the hidden psychological wisdom and laws of this universe. Be sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this content. So, recorded on clay tablets over 4,000 years ago, this is before Rome, before Greece, there's a tale of a really powerful figure who descended into the land of the dead, was killed, hung on a hook, and returned to life 3 days later. But the most surprising part about this story, it's that the person who died wasn't a man. It was a goddess, and her name was Inanna. To understand this story, we need to travel back to ancient Sumer. This is the oldest known civilization on Earth, around 2,000 years before Christ was born. The Sumerians are the ones who invented writing, they built the first cities, and they used to record their myths on clay tablets. So this is how we have this tale. And one of the most famous figures in their mythology was the goddess Inanna. She ruled over love, fertility, war, and power. She was known as the Queen of Heaven. But one day, Inanna made a decision that no god had ever dared to do before her. She decided to descend into the land of the underworld. And in ancient mythology, the underworld wasn't a place of punishment. It was basically a place where everyone who died went to. Kings, rulers, everyone. No one really came back from this. So before leaving, she told her servant a warning: if I don't return in 3 days' time, go get the gods and tell them to help me. And then she went on her journey to reach the underworld. And in order to reach the underworld, she had to pass through 7 gates. And at each gate, a guardian demanded something from her. She was stripped down of identity and ego at each of those gates. At the first gate, it was her crown. At the second gate, her jewelry was taken. At the third gate, her breastplate. At the fourth, her rings. At the fifth, her royal garments. At the sixth, her symbols of power. And by the time she reached the 7th gate, the Queen of Heaven stood completely naked and powerless. And she entered the throne room of the Queen of the Dead, and the judges of the underworld looked upon her, and they pronounced their verdict: death. Inanna was struck down, and her body was hung on a hook. And for 3 days, she remained there. And while Inanna lay in the underworld, the world above began to suffer, because remember, she's the goddess of fertility and love and light. And so on earth, without this goddess of love and fertility, nothing grew. The crops all failed, the animals stopped mating. Everything came to a standstill. And so in many ways, this tale tells about winter and spring, this experience the ancients tried to really understand, where life pauses. And historians also refer to Inanna as the planet Venus, which dips below the horizon for 3 days and returns. And then something unexpected happened. The gods sent help, as she had asked. And 2 mysterious beings are sent into the underworld to fetch her. And they carry with them the food and water of life, which they then pour over her body, and alive she becomes again. She rises. And the goddess who had died in the underworld returns to the world of the living. Sound familiar? It is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, resuscitation stories ever recorded. But the real meaning of the myth, it goes deeper than resuscitation or the copyright infringement by Jesus Christ. The real meaning, because you got to remember, ancient myths were ways for people to understand human psychology and make meaning of what was happening around them. And in many ways, Inanna's descent mirrors something that every single person, every one of us eventually faces: the journey into an inner underworld, moments where identity collapses, when confidence disappears, failure, doubt, self-judgment, when everything that once defined us is stripped away. Have you ever had this, an ego death? If you're an entrepreneur, you've probably encountered this a lot, or if you're creative. And just like the 7 gates, each gate removes another illusion until eventually you're confronted with the only thing that's left, yourself, consciousness. And those who survive the descent, they return transformed, resilient, more powerful because they've touched the darkness. They know they can make it through. So maybe that's why the story of Inanna and Jesus Christ have survived for thousands of years, because every life, eventually, it's going to lead us to the same place. Every story, no matter who you are, you're going to have to face this descent into your inner world. And the real question, it's not, is this ever going to happen to you? The real question is, are you going to rise again when it does?